Chapter 1. The Broken Quill at Mayfair. The brilliant golden sunshine of a warm June afternoon bathed the smooth cobblestone streets of Mayfair, the most opulent and fashionable district in London. Within the grand estate of Lady Catherine Sterling, a garden tea party was in full swing, bustling with high society's elite. London's high gentry gathered beneath delicate white lace parasols, their polite laughter and the soft clink of fine Wedgwood porcelain teacups echoing through the summer air. A gentle breeze carried the sweet, fragrant scent of climbing roses and blossoming jasmine, yet the atmosphere within the garden was far from pleasant for Clara Vance. She stood silently in the deep shadow of a massive ancient oak tree, desperately trying to conceal her worn, faded gown from the mocking, critical stares of the surrounding upper class. The light cast long amber shadows across the manicured lawns, illuminating the delicate silk gowns of the ladies who fluttered their fans in the summer heat. Clara Vance stood quietly in the corner of the stone gallery leading to the garden, her hands clutching a worn, faded oak box that held her hand-carved goose quills and handmade inkwells. She wore a simple dress of pale gray cotton, its hem meticulously stitched but unable to hide the poverty of its wearer. Her woolen gloves were frayed at the fingertips, and her old straw bonnet was tied with a faded ribbon, looking completely out of place among the glittering silk satin gowns and expensive feathered hats of the noble ladies. Since the sudden passing of her late father, Thomas Vance Aunce, a celebrated royal calligrapher and ink-maker, Clara had lost all family honor and property. Her father had been falsely accused of forging a royal land deed, which led to the confiscation of his titles, workshop and estate, and he had died of a sudden stroke from grief. To pay off her father's debts of honor, Clara was forced to hide her former status, traveling across London to write letters, copy ledgers, and repair quills to make a living. She remembered how her father had always kept his workshop neat, teaching her that every tool had a purpose and a story. Every time she saw a goose quill, or heard the soft scratch of a nib on parchment, her heart ached with an enduring sorrow. She fondly remembered those peaceful days in Bath, inside their modest workshop filled with the scent of oak gall ink, boiling gum arabic, and the rhythmic beat of the paper press. Her father had taught her that penmanship was the absolute honesty of the soul, and a scribe's hands must always be gentle and patient to find the perfect harmony of every stroke. Yet this aristocratic London world had no room for such honesty. They only cared for noble lineages and massive dowries. Since her father's passing, those who had once been close friends, who had come to share tea and commission expensive family trees, had instantly turned their backs. They viewed her as a dangerous contagion to be avoided, whispering about the fraudulent Vance family whenever she walked through Mayfair. The memories of Mayfair gentry who once praised her father's artistry now felt like cold ash, reminding her of the fickle nature of aristocratic favor. The large oak door leading to the garden swung open, and Lady Catherine Sterling stepped out with the haughty bearing of a powerful matriarch. She was draped in a luxurious emerald green silk gown, her black lace fan fluttering constantly. Behind her followed a group of young noble ladies who giggled behind their fans at the sight of Clara's impoverished appearance. Catherine stopped directly in front of her, her critical eyes sweeping from head to toe with undisguised contempt. The young noble ladies whispered behind their silk fans, castigating Clara's simple gray dress as a disgrace to the Mayfair social assembly. "Oh, look who stands here," Catherine said, her high-born tone filled with venomous disdain. "I wondered why the butler allowed such a ragged creature to stand in my gallery. It turns out to be the daughter of Thomas Vance, the fraud who forged royal deeds and died in ignominy. Miss Vance, do you think this estate is a sanctuary for vagrants? Did you bring your cheap writing trash here to offend our eyes?" Her voice was dripping with absolute venom, designed to humiliate the poor scribe in front of the entire gathering of high society. Clara felt her chest tighten, Catherine's words like poisoned needles piercing her honor and the memory of her revered late father. Yet she stood straight, her clear blue eyes looking directly into the eyes of the powerful noblewoman. She curtsied with perfect etiquette, as her father had taught her. "Lady Catherine, I came at the butler's request to write the guest list and menu for tonight's dinner. I assure you my skills are inherited from my father, and I will complete the work perfectly, without failing your family's trust." Clara kept her chin raised, refusing to show any signs of weakness before Lady Catherine's aggressive and hostile posture. "Skills?" Catherine laughed, her sharp laughter cutting through the distant sound of violins. "Your father was banished from royal favor for his deceit. He forged administrative documents and died in exile. Do you think I would allow the daughter of a criminal to touch my family's precious parchments with ink-stained hands? Mayfair high society has no place for poor scribes with ink dust on their fingers. Your presence here only soils our carpets and ruins the elegant atmosphere of our tea party. Catherine's black lace fan fluttered rapidly, a physical sign of her growing irritation at Clara's calm, dignified response. Catherine's insults cut deep, and the surrounding crowd began to whisper, their mocking glares directed at the solitary girl. Clara clenched her hands beneath her faded gray skirt. She could bear the mockery of her dress, but she could not remain silent while they trampled on her father's honor. The whispers of the Mayfair gentry grew louder, forming a wall of hostile sound that threatened to overwhelm the young girl. "My lady, my father was no fraud," Clara said, her voice soft but firm, each word ringing clearly. "He was framed by envious partners who coveted his talent. The truth of the Vance name will eventually be brought to light. If you do not trust my skills, I will leave immediately, but please show respect for the deceased." She stood firm, her deep blue eyes reflecting the bright summer light, representing the unbroken spirit of the Vance family. "You dare talk back to me, you wretched girl." Catherine shrieked in anger. She stepped forward, violently snatching the wooden toolbox from Clara's hands. With a cruel and ruthless motion, she threw the box onto the stone floor of the gallery. The heavy wooden box struck the stone flags with a loud, hollow thud, scattering her precious writing tools across the path. A sharp crack echoed as the wooden box split in two. The delicate quills her father had hand-carved, along with the stone inkwell, the sole heirloom of her father, shattered on the stone floor. The inkwell broke, and the black ink spilled over the wet stone, staining the broken quills. The mocking laughter of the noble crowd rose in cruel complicity. Clara knelt on the cold stone, her trembling hands gathering the broken pieces of the inkwell and quills. Her heart was filled with agony, but she resolutely refused to let her tears fall before these heartless people. Clara knelt on the cold stone gallery, ignoring the sharp pain in her knees, as she gathered the broken quills and the pieces of her father's inkwell. Chapter 2. Soft pen strokes and trembling hands. While Clara was kneeling on the stone floor, gathering the broken pieces of her heirlooms under the mocking stares of the haughty crowd, the main doors of the manor swung open. Arthur Howard, the Duke of Ravenscroft, entered with heavy steps, his riding boots clicking sharply on the stone flags. He wore a dark riding cloak covered in dust from the northern roads, his chiseled face pale as wax, and his cold ash-gray eyes showing the exhaustion and pain of the migraines that tormented his mind. Arthur had returned from the battlefield of Waterloo a year ago, bringing with him a severe nerve injury. His right hand suffered from violent, uncontrollable tremors due to an artillery blast. These tremors prevented him from holding a pen or signing his name on the documents governing the Ravenscroft iron mines. This helplessness made him cold and you-what, hiding his trembling right hand in a thick black leather glove to protect the pride of the House of Howard. The royal doctors in London had given up, declaring he would never write or sign documents again. The mud of the southern roads covered the carriage wheels, a testament to the long, grueling journey the Duke had undertaken from London. Memories of the battlefield of Waterloo returned like a haunting ghost whenever Arthur's tremors flared. He remembered the deafening explosions tearing through the night, the clash of metal, and the screams of comrades falling under the artillery fire. Since that fateful blast, his right hand no longer obeyed his mind. It trembled violently, making it impossible to sign the crucial administrative documents for the Ravenscroft mines. This helplessness turned the former commander's life into a silent hell. He hated the noise and hypocrisy of London high society, who only waited to see him fall to seize his power. The memory of that terrible artillery explosion at Waterloo still haunted his dreams, a physical and mental shadow he could not escape. The headache and hand spasms were tormenting Arthur violently at this moment. He walked unsteadily, leaning his weight on his silver-headed cane, his knuckles turning white from the strain. The noisy chatter and the sharp clink of Wedgwood porcelain from the tea party struck his senses. He felt his right hand twitching violently beneath his cloak. Lady Catherine saw her nephew enter and immediately changed her tone, offering a fake smile. "Arthur, you have returned. I was just dealing with a fraudulent scribe who almost soiled our reputation." His left hand gripped the silver-headed cane with white-knuckled force, trying to anchor his body against the waves of pain. But Arthur paid her no attention. In the middle of the chaotic gallery, Clara Vance was kneeling, holding the only intact quill, using a small steel penknife to carefully trim the damaged nib. With gentle, precise, and highly focused movements, she dipped the nib into the remaining black ink and lightly stroked it across a sheet of scrap parchment to test the flow. Clara did not look up, her entire focus centered on the delicate work of carving the goose quill with her small steel penknife. The soft, rhythmic scratching of the nib on the parchment produced a soothing, peaceful sound. This sound, with its steady cadence and calming rhythm, caught Arthur's attention. Miraculously, as the quill stroked the paper, his breathing began to slow, and the tremors in his right hand gradually subsided as he focused on her precise hand movements. A quiet peace washed over his mind, dispelling the chaos in his head. He sensed a perfect mechanical control and stability from the scribe's hands. The sound of the pen and the gentle scent of dry lavender rising from the broken inkwell acted like cool water on the Duke's burning brain. The lavender scent from the broken inkwell spread through the damp air, offering a moment of relief to his overstimulated senses. Arthur stopped, his cold ash-gray eyes fixed on the girl kneeling on the stone floor. He stepped past Catherine, walked straight to Clara, and knelt slightly to pick up the remaining wooden penholder to hand to her. He looked at her refined but sorrowful face and her ink-stained hands, which held the pride of a true artisan. Arthur stood motionless, his cold gray eyes searching her face for any sign of fear or deceit, but finding only quiet determination. "This hand, did you trim this nib yourself?" Arthur asked in a deep, quiet voice that carried his intense surprise. Her voice, when she looked up to answer, possessed a rare clarity and calm. Her voice was soft yet clear, carrying a gentle authority that cut through the noise of the surrounding tea party. Clara looked up at the famously cold Duke, sensing his sternness but finding no contempt in his eyes. She curtsied slightly. "Your Grace, I am trimming the nib to test the ink. This is a special ink made from oak galls and dried lavender passed down by my father, which allows the pen to write smoothly and reduces scratchy sounds. Forgive me if I have disturbed you." She curtsied with perfect elegance, showing the thorough upbringing she had received in Mayfair before her family's sudden ruin. Catherine tried to interrupt. "Arthur, do not concern yourself with this Vance girl. I am having the servants throw her out." Catherine's face contorted with anger at being ignored by her nephew, her black lace fan snapping shut with a sharp click. "Silence," Arthur growled softly, his voice carrying the terrifying authority of the head of the House of Howard, which immediately silenced Catherine, her face turning red with humiliation before the guests. Arthur did not look at his aunt, his eyes remained fixed on Clara. Her steady pen strokes and precise hands were exactly what he had been seeking to help him regain control over his damaged hand. He knew her skill could help him write and sign again. The Duke's low growl was a clear warning that he would tolerate no interference from his aunt in his administrative decisions. "Miss Vance," Arthur said, his gloved hand gently helping her rise. "I require a private secretary to copy administrative ledgers and manage the Ravenscroft iron mine documents in Cumbria. The scribes in London write too carelessly and do not understand the structure of paper and ink. I will pay you £100 and provide lodging at Ravenscroft Castle if you agree to accompany me to Cumbria today. I believe your gentle hands and skill can assist me. Your father's reputation does not define the value of your penmanship today." He offered her a chance at freedom and independence, a way to escape the constant harassment of the London creditors. Clara was astonished. £100. It was a massive sum, enough to pay her father's urgent debts and secure the old workshop in Bath. She looked into his cold but sincere ash-gray eyes, sensing genuine respect for her craft. She curtsied deeply. "I am honored, Your Grace. I am ready to depart." Claire accepted the proposal, knowing that this was her only chance to save her family's name and protect her future. Arthur immediately ordered Harrison to prepare the carriage and baggage. Clara gathered the broken pieces of her quills, wrapping them in an old handkerchief as her final keepsake of Mayfair, and followed the tall figure of the Duke. She followed the tall Duke to the waiting carriage, her old handkerchief clutching the broken quills like a precious treasure. Chapter 3. Ravenscroft Castle. In Cumbria, the carriage of the House of Howard traveled for 3 days and nights over rough roads, leaving the glittering lights of London behind to head toward the wild north. Throughout the long journey, Clara sat opposite the silent Duke. He rarely spoke, his eyes closed or staring out the window, where the scenery changed from the lush green fields of the south to the rocky valleys and thick fog of Cumbria. Clara noticed his brow furrow in pain occasionally, and his right gloved hand constantly gripped the silver cane to control his tremors. She understood that he was silently enduring the immense helplessness of not being able to sign the documents governing the Moss-sought Ravenscroft, the livelihood of thousands of local workers. The loneliness of this Duke seemed even deeper than her own. She also had her own thoughts, reflecting on the glorious past when her father was a respected calligrapher, and how quickly their family had collapsed after being falsely accused. Amid the towering mountains of the north, two wounded souls sat opposite each other, sharing a silent empathy. The long journey northward was a test of endurance, the cold winds of Cumbria growing stronger with each passing mile. As the carriage turned onto the narrow road winding along the gray, fog-shrouded cliffs, Ravenscroft Castle emerged like a colossal stone fortress, grand yet warm and cold. The Cumbria wind howled constantly through the ancient stone watch towers, creating a low, mournful sound like the sigh of history. This ancient castle was built in the 14th century, where gray stone and moss covered every corner, bringing a sense of complete isolation from the outside world. Harrison, the loyal butler with a stern face but kind eyes, opened the carriage door and held an umbrella for Clara. She shivered slightly in the cold wind, carrying the dampness of the wild Cumbria Valley. The air here was very different from London. It was clean, crisp, and heavy with the scent of wet heather and damp stone. The ancient stone walls of Ravenscroft Castle loomed through the dense fog, a dark sentinel overlooking the wild North Sea coast. Arthur stepped down after her, his black cloak fluttering in the cold wind. His cold face looked at the ancient castle. Cumbria does not have the warm tea parties or the fake flattery of London. Miss Vance, here there is only fog, grey stone, and cold silence. I hope you do not regret coming here. Ravenscroft Castle is a place filled with the shadows of the past, and the people here are as cold as those stones. Arthur's cold grey eyes looked at the dark castle, his thoughts lost in the memories of his mother's tragic passing. Your Grace, I seek silence for honest work, not false words. Clara looked directly into his eyes, her warm and steady voice ringing out in the cold wind. I am the daughter of a scribe. I am accustomed to hardships. The silence of Cumbria is a blessing to me, a place where my hands can create without being judged. These grey cliffs have their own strength, and I believe that under this roof, I will find the focus to complete my work. My father always taught me that in the quietest places, an artisan can create the most perfect strokes. Clara's warm voice was a stark contrast to the freezing Cumbria wind, bringing a sense of comfort to the wet Duke. Arthur nodded slightly, a gleam of approval passing through his ash-gray eyes. He led her through the large oak doors into the grand hall of Ravenscroft Castle. Cold and darkness filled the space. The vast grey stone corridors were hung with portraits of the Howard ancestors under the dim candlelight. The silence in the castle was heavy, as if time had stopped since the Duchess's death 10 years ago. There was no laughter or sound of activity, only the wind beating against the stone windows. The corridors of the castle were cold and damp, smelling of old wood, wet stone, and centuries of family history. Butler Harrison led Clara to the attic, where a small, simple room was prepared. The room had a sloping oak ceiling and grey stone walls, but possessed a large arched window overlooking the vast, foggy Cumbria Valley. Harriet looked at her with concern. Miss Vance, the scribes from London always complained about this room and requested larger chambers below. I apologize for this modest reception. The small room in the attic was simple, yet it possessed a quiet beauty that appealed to Clara's artisan soul. Clara smiled gently, placing her toolbox on the old oak table. Harrison, I am grateful for this room. The light from the arched window is perfect for trimming quills and calligraphic writing, and the sound of the wind outside helps me focus. This simplicity is a blessing. It reminds me of my father's simple workshop in Bath. I do not need luxury, only a quiet corner to keep my true ink. She set her father's wooden toolbox on the oak table, feeling a sense of peace she had not felt since leaving Bath. Harrison's stern expression softened, a silent respect appearing in his eyes. He bowed and left her to rest after the long journey. Harrison bowed respectfully, his kind eyes showing a quiet appreciation for the young scribe's modest and gentle nature. The next afternoon, Clara began her work in the ancient library in the east wing of the castle. Sitting in the center of the large library was a massive mahogany writing desk, piled with administrative documents for the Ravenscroft mines that had not been signed. These documents were severely backlogged because Arthur could not control his trembling hand to sign them. Lady Catherine and their London partners were using this reason to prove he lacked administrative capacity, aiming to seize control of the Mossot and ancestral lands. The Eastern Library was a vast room filled with thousands of leather-bound books, their pages smelling of old paper and ink. Arthur stood at the library door, his wet eyes looking at the pile of documents. If I cannot sign these administrative files before the magistrate's evaluation next month, Catherine will have the legal grounds to strip me of this mine. The scribes before you all gave up, because they could not help me write a stable signature. My hand spasms violently the moment I hold a pen due to the old wound. Every ruined signature feels like an insult to my honor. They want to strip me of my power and turn the mine workers into slaves of their greed. Arthur's frustration with his hand tremors was evident in the way he stared at the unsigned Mossad documents. Clara walked to the writing desk, gently tracing her hands over the documents. She looked at Arthur with deep understanding and determination. Your Grace, writing is not just the mechanics of the fingers, but the breathing and focus of the mind. My father taught me how to help those with hand injuries recover their writing through breathing regulation and relaxed grip. I promise you, with my hands and skill, I will help you retrain your signature. We will start by changing the way you hold the pen and the quality of the ink to suit your injury. You do not need to worry about the past documents. We will take it step by step. Trust and patience will bring your hand back. Clara's promise to help him retrain his signature was a lifeline, offering him a chance to reclaim his administrative authority. Arthur looked at her slender, gentle hands and heard her warm voice soothing his nerves. For the first time in a long year, a ray of hope lit the Duke's dark soul amid the Cumbria fog. The Duke looked at her slender hands, feeling a ray of hope pierce the dark clouds of his solitary life. Chapter 4. The Penstrokes of Patience. In the following days, the ancient library of Ravenscroft Castle, which had been locked away for a decade, became the setting for a process of intense, patient practice. Clara dedicated all her time to helping Arthur control his trembling right hand. She understood that Arthur's nerve injury prevented him from writing with heavy pressure, as strong pressure would trigger violent muscle spasms. Therefore, she decided to train him using classical Regency calligraphy methods, breathing regulation, a relaxed grip, and the use of specially crafted quills. The quiet library became a sanctuary of patience, where the only sound was the soft breathing of the two partners. Clara sat by the large mahogany writing desk, meticulously carving special goose quills harvested from swans. She selected quills with thick shafts, but carved the nibs to be wider and softer than usual, to minimize friction with the parchment. To obtain nibs with the best elasticity, she boiled the quills in hot sand at about 150 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours to clear the shafts and harden the keratin. This was a family curing technique that kept the quills from splitting or spreading under the unstable pressure of a trembling hand. She carefully trimmed the goose quills, ensuring the nibs were soft enough to glide smoothly over the rough parchment. She also handcrafted a special ink from natural oak galls mixed with gum arabic to increase viscosity, adding a gentle lavender scent. This thick ink allowed the pen to glide more smoothly, automatically filling in the microtremors of the nib when Arthur wrote. Clara patiently explained the chemical properties of the ink to Arthur. This oak gall ink contains natural tannic acid, which combines with iron salts to create a permanent bond that darkens over time. The addition of natural gum arabic controls the ink's flow, slowing down the quill and creating a natural mechanical resistance that dampens the small tremors from your fingers. To create this ink, my father spent years selecting autumn oak galls with the highest tannin content, drying and crushing them, then boiling them with pure rainwater collected in Bath. Every drop of ink contains the silence of nature. The oak gall ink was thick and fragrant, its lavender scent filling the room and soothing Arthur's overstimulated nerves. Your Grace, do not try to use finger force to suppress the tremor, Clara said gently as she sat beside him. She placed her slender, warm hand over Arthur's trembling right hand, guiding him to relax his knuckles. Let your wrist and shoulder lead the way. Take a deep breath when you begin a stroke, keep your breathing light, and exhale slowly as you glide the quill down. The pen strokes will follow your breathing. She guided his hand with gentle pressure, teaching him to let his wrist and shoulder lead the pen's movement. Arthur followed her guidance. The warmth from Clara's gentle hand on his skin brought a strange peace. He began to breathe deeply according to her quiet count. As he exhaled, Clara gently guided his wrist to draw simple straight lines on scrap parchment. The soft scratch of the quill, sot swat, sounded peaceful in the quiet library. Miraculously, under her meticulous guidance and the smooth glide of the special ink, Arthur's trembling hand gradually found its rhythm. The initial scribbles slowly became straight and stable. The soft scratching of the quill on the parchment was a soothing rhythm, bringing a sense of peace to his mind. To help him control the pen, Clara drew faint concentric curves on the parchment, asking Arthur to follow them. Whenever his hand shook violently, she gently squeezed his hand, stopping to breathe deeply and reset his nerves. They spent hours at the mahogany desk, forgetting time and the cold wind howling outside the castle. Arthur watched Clara, seeing her soft curls sway in the candlelight and the deep focus in her blue eyes, a warm emotion rising in his chest. Arthur practiced the curves and lines, his hand growing steadier under her constant and patient guidance. "You did wonderfully, Arthur," Clara whispered in encouragement, her blue eyes shining with joy. It was the first time she had called him by his name naturally, and it made Arthur's heart flutter. Her encouraging smile was a source of strength, helping him overcome the fear of failure that had gripped him. Arthur looked at the writing on the paper, then at her refined face beside him. The lavender scent of the ink mingled with the natural fragrance of her hair, dispelling the tension in his mind. He realized that Clara's extraordinary patience and gentle hands were the only medicine that could heal him. He wondered if someone damaged by war like him deserved such tenderness. The lavender ink glided smoothly, leaving a dark, permanent record of his progress on the white parchment. "Thank you, Clara," Arthur said in a low voice, turning his hand to gently hold her soft fingers. "For years I thought I was just a useless cripple left behind by the war. My ruined signatures were always a blow to my pride. But today you have shown me that I can write my life again. This signature is not just my honor, it is our future." He held her hand, his ash-gray eyes filled with a deep gratitude for the girl who had helped him write again. Clara looked into his gray eyes, which were no longer filled with sorrow, a warm emotion swelling in her heart. The social distance between the noble duke and the poor scribe seemed to vanish in the peaceful library. She knew her task was not just to trim quills but to restore a man's faith in life. They both quietly looked out the window, where the Cumbria fogs still lingered, but inside, a warm light had emerged. Clara felt a warm emotion rising in her chest, the distance between them vanishing in the quiet library. Arthur began to understand that penmanship was not about force, but a quiet conversation between the mind and the paper. Every afternoon in the ancient library, under Clara's patient guidance, he gradually regained control of his fingers. He no longer feared the quill, instead, he looked forward to the soothing sound of the pen and the warmth of her gentle hand. The Duke's hand was steady as he signed his name, a testament to the success of her calligraphic retraining. Chapter 5: The Warning Letter from London. The next morning the Cumbria sky was grey and cold, thick clouds of fog completely covering the windy, barren hills. In the warm study of Ravenscroft Castle, Arthur Howard stood by the large desk, his cold grey eyes fixed on a letter that had just arrived from London by express mail. The letter was sealed with the emerald green wax of Lady Catherine Howard. The morning fog was thick, shrouding the Cumbria hills in a cold grey blanket that matched Arthur's grim mood. The letter was filled with threats and malice directed at Clara. "Arthur, I write to warn you one last time. You have been blinded by that poor calligrapher girl. Clara Vance is the daughter of Thomas Vance, the fraud who forged royal deeds and died in debt. She is a swindler escaping creditors in Mayfair. If you continue to harbor her at Ravenscroft, the reputation of the Howard family will be ruined when the Cumbria gentry learn you are protecting a criminal. I will expose this truth, and you will face the scorn of high society. Dismiss her immediately if you do not want your title tarnished." Catherine's letter was a direct attack on Clara's honor, filled with malicious lies designed to force her out of the castle. Arthur read the letter coldly, his lips curving into a contemptuous sneer. He knew that Catherine's late husband was the real mastermind behind the plot to frame Thomas Vance to seize the Royal Ink Workshop. They had ruined an honest artisan family, forced his daughter into poverty, and now wanted to continue trampling her to protect their stolen assets. Arthur felt no doubt toward Clara. Instead, he was determined to protect her at all costs. He remembered his late mother, a kind woman who taught him to value honest workers. She used to write to him when he was at war, and her gentle handwriting was always a great support. With a decisive movement, he threw the letter into the fireplace, burning the malicious words to ash. Arthur's resolve to protect Clara was absolute, his gray eyes flashing with anger as he watched the letter burn. "Harrison," Arthur called coldly to the butler waiting at the door. He called the butler in a cold, authoritative tone, ready to take immediate action to handle the threat. "Yes, Your Grace." Harrison bowed respectfully. His loyal heart ready to support the young Duke in any conflict that arose. "Prepare the carriage immediately. I must meet Solicitor Phillips in York, and under no circumstances is Miss Vance to know about this letter. She only needs to focus on helping me write in the library. I will handle the storm myself." The carriage was prepared quickly, the horses ready for the long ride to York to meet Solicitor Phillips. Arthur rode his horse alongside Harrison's carriage across the windy Cumbria hills. The path was rough and slippery under the cold rain, but his resolve was ironclad. He remembered Clara's tired but proud face when she trimmed the quills, and promised himself he would not let anyone ruin her future. Arthur rode alongside the carriage, his thoughts focused on the girl who had brought light back to his life. A few hours later, at Solicitor Phillips' office in York, Arthur sat opposite his family's loyal lawyer. On the oak desk, Phillips examined the debt files of Thomas Vance that Arthur had ordered him to collect. The room was filled with the scent of old paper and warm candle wax. The office of Solicitor Phillips was warm, smelling of old leather, paper, and hot wax. "Your Grace, the debts of Miss Vance's father amount to nearly £4,000, Phillips said with concern. "This is a massive sum. Do you truly wish to use your personal funds to pay this debt? This is a huge expenditure that might cause the family council to question you. Furthermore, it involves a man who died under charges of treason." Phillips looked at the debt files, expressing concern over the large sum needed to clear Thomas Vance's name. "Pay every single penny of it under my name, Phillips," Arthur commanded, his natural authority flashing in his eyes. "Retrieve all debt notes and civil judgments against Clara Vance. From this day forward, I want her completely free from any financial threat. No one in Mayfair will have the right to trample on her again. She deserves to have her honor protected, and her honor is my own. I will not allow them to use debts to control and humiliate her. If any creditor dares to harass her, they will face our family solicitors. I want the Vance family name restored before the law." Arthur's command was decisive, ordering the lawyer to pay off every single penny of the debt immediately. Arthur tapped his cane on the floor. "One more thing. Secretly purchase the ink and paper workshop of her father in Bath, which is currently held by the bank. Transfer the ownership of that workshop to Clara Vance. I want her to have her true home, where she can create her art. At the same time, prepare a lawsuit against those who framed her father. I will clear the Vance name. Justice may be late, but it must be served. I will not stop until her father's honor is restored before the Royal Academy." He also ordered the purchase of her father's Bath workshop, intending to return it to Clara as a gift. Phillips looked at the Duke in astonishment. He had served the Howard family for decades, and had never seen Arthur care for anyone like this since his mother's death. He felt deep respect for the young master, who was willing to oppose London's high society for a poor girl. He bowed. "I understand, Your Grace. All legal procedures will be completed quickly. I will personally handle the matter in Bath. Thomas Vance's name will be cleared." The lawyer bowed in admiration, realizing the Duke's deep commitment to the young scribe's daughter. Arthur rode back to the castle under the cold drizzle of Cumbria, his heart light. He was ready to use his title and life to protect Clara's honor and future. He knew Clara's gentle hands deserved the protection of the House of Howard, and he would build a shield for her. Arthur rode back to Cumbria under the cold rain, his heart light with the knowledge that she was safe. Arthur also stopped at a small inn near York for a simple lunch. He read the financial reports of the Ravenscroft mines. He knew that if the mine fell into Catherine's hands, hundreds of Cumbria workers' families would face ruin. Protecting the mine was not only his duty but his commitment to this land. Protecting the Mossad and Clara was his solemn duty, a commitment he would uphold with his very life. Chapter 6, Snowstorm Night in the Ancient Library. The first snowstorm of the season swept across the wild Cumbria moors with far greater fury than anticipated. The howling wind rattled the leaded glass windows of Ravenscroft Castle, creating a terrifying noise. In the dim library on the second floor, where the hearth fire only lit a small corner of the room, Arthur Howard sat in a leather armchair. His face was contorted in pain from a violent tremor in his right hand. The freezing cold of the snowstorm had stimulated his damaged nerves, causing his hand to twitch uncontrollably. The spasm extended to his shoulder, causing intense pain and rapid panicked breathing. The howling wind rumbled through the stone corridors, carrying the icy breath of the North Sea. In the dark library, terrifying memories of the Waterloo battlefield returned like a real nightmare. Arthur felt as though he was lying in the freezing mud, surrounded by the deafening explosions of artillery shells and the screams of soldiers. The blast that tore through his hand had robbed him of control, leaving a sense of humiliation and helplessness that had lasted for a year. He remembered close comrades who fell before his eyes whom he could not save. He felt helpless, as if slipping into a lonely madness. Cold sweat stood on his forehead, and he pressed his trembling arm to his chest to stop the spasms, but in vain. His silver-headed cane fell onto the carpet with a heavy thud. He felt like a useless cripple left on the margins of society, unable to protect his family estate. The bitterness in his blood made him want to collapse. In his head there was only the roar of artillery and thick darkness. The wound from his past was like an invisible chain tightening around his heart whenever winter returned to this cold stone valley. The memory of Waterloo was a heavy burden, a phantom pain that flared in the freezing cold. The library door opened softly. Clara entered, holding a lamp to check the drafts before sleeping. When she saw Arthur's tall figure huddled in the chair, clutching his violently trembling hand, she rushed to his side. Setting the lamp on the desk, she knelt beside his armchair on the warm carpet without hesitation. Clara's entrance with the lamp was like a ray of light piercing the darkness of his solitary pain. "Arthur, look at me, take deep breaths," Clara called out, her voice filled with worry and tenderness. Her warm voice was a soothing balm, helping to slow his rapid, panicked breathing. Arthur tried to control the tremor, his voice hoarse and trembling with pain. "Leave. Leave this place immediately, Clara." The tremor at his hand. "I do not want you to see me like this." Arthur tried to push her away to protect her from his weakness, but his voice failed him. "I am not going anywhere, Arthur," Clara said firmly. Clara refused to leave, her loyal heart determined to stand by him in his dark moment. She gently sat on the armrest of the chair, drawing his head to rest on her shoulder. Her warm, gentle hands reached out, holding his violently twitching right hand. She pressed his hand against her chest, where he could feel the steady beat of her heart and her warmth. The warmth of her body acted like a gentle electric current, relaxing his contracting muscles. She held his hand, her warmth spreading through his skin and relaxing the tensed muscles. "Close your eyes, Arthur," Clara whispered in his ear, her voice soft and warm like a night breeze. "Focus on my breathing, inhale and exhale very slowly. My hands are holding yours, you do not have to fight the pain alone. Let the past rest behind you." Her whispered words were a gentle anchor, helping him focus on the reality of her presence. Arthur closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of Clara's body and her steady breathing. The nerve spasms in his arm began to ease under her warm touch and comforting voice. He felt as though he was being pulled from the cold depths of the battlefield, back to the warm reality of her presence beside him. Arthur's tremors slowly subsided as he leaned against her, feeling a deep peace wash over him. To distract him from the pain, Clara gently held his hand, guiding him to draw basic calligraphic lines on a sheet of parchment under the firelight. She took out her father's calligraphy notebook and read to him softly. "Penmanship starts from the heart, passes through the breath, and shows through the nib. When the mind is still, the stroke follows a straight line. Every stroke is a rhythm of peace." She moved her fingers with his, creating the smooth curves of ancient writing. The lavender scent of the ink rose, bringing a deep relaxation. They practiced the calligraphy strokes together, the pen moving smoothly under her guidance. Together they drew simple letters in the shadows, from straight lines to winding letters like A, B and C. Arthur's hand grew steady as he followed Clara's graceful movements. Under her gentle guidance, the tremors in Arthur's hand disappeared completely. He looked at his trial signature on the paper, though still showing small tremors from the injury. It was sharp and full of life. Arthur looked at the girl beside him, his gray eyes filled with gratitude and deep love. He knew he had found his self-respect through her gentle hands. They sat together by the fireplace, ignoring the thick snow falling outside. The signature was sharp and stable, a physical proof of the success of their patient training. Arthur turned to Clara, looking at her kind face in the firelight. "This castle has been cold since my mother passed. But tonight, thanks to you and this calligraphy book, I have felt a true home. I want to restore this library, making it a place to hold your artwork. Some stone doors will no longer whisper cold sounds, but will witness our love. I promise you, Ravenscroft will become our true heaven." Clara smiled gently, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of true happiness. She read a classic poem about the patience of an artisan, her sweet voice dispelling the cold of the storm. Her father's book was a bridge bringing their souls closer. Every page seemed to warm in their budding love. Arthur looked at her with gratitude, knowing he had found his true home in her gentle arms. Chapter 7. The trap in the ancient library. The next afternoon, the Cumbria sky was covered in a dull gray of thick fog. The wind blew from the rocky valley, howling through the ancient watchtowers of Ravenscroft Castle. Amid this and cold space, a luxurious carriage bearing the Howard Crest rooter into the castle driveway. Lady Catherine Howard stepped down with a triumphant look, followed by Magistrate Higgins and Dr. Warren, a leading neurological specialist from London. Catherine had prepared this plan for a long time to prove Arthur was mentally unfit due to his injury, aiming to strip him of the Ravenscroft mines and transfer the estate to her son. She was certain that with Arthur's past helplessness, he would not pass this administrative test. The wind howled through the stone battlements, carrying the cold mist of the Cumbria valleys. Harrison opened the hall door, leading the guests into the grand drawing room. Dr. Warren and Magistrate Higgins spoke quietly about the Duke's health. Warren noted, "A motor nerve injury does not mean a loss of civil judgment. We must evaluate based on objective evidence." Higgins agreed, though he expressed concern over Catherine's constant accusations. Catherine was extremely hostile, alleging that Arthur lost his temper frequently, could not control his trembling hand to sign any decree, and that letting a poor scribe run the library was an insult to the family. She wanted to prove Arthur was unfit to seize everything. Catherine had envied Arthur's mother for years, and now her greed for the Howard estate overrode family morals. She coveted the Ravenscroft mines, the most lucrative resource in northern England, and had allied with London creditors to pressure Arthur. Catherine's carriage was luxurious, its polished chassis a stark contrast to the rough northern roads. Arthur Howard stood in the main hall to receive them. His tall figure stood straight like a mountain of stone in the cold Cumbria wind, his gray eyes fixed on his aunt with intense coldness. Though his right hand in the black glove trembled slightly due to the cold, his commanding presence made Catherine and Magistrate Higgins hesitate. Arthur Howard received them in the grand hall, his tall figure standing like a stone monument. "Arthur," Catherine said in a false voice, "I have brought Magistrate Higgins and Dr. Warren to conduct the necessary evaluation. The Howard family cannot be run by a man who cannot sign his own name on administrative documents. This is for the honor of our ancestors. A massive mine like Ravenscroft needs a man with a steady hand to run it." Catherine spoke with a false concern, attempting to mask her greed as family honor. Magistrate Higgins bowed respectfully to Arthur. "Your Grace, pursuant to Lady Catherine's official petition, we must conduct this capacity evaluation to confirm your management of the Ravenscroft mines. We request your cooperation to protect the family's legal interests." Magistrate Higgins requested the Duke's cooperation to conduct a fair and objective evaluation. "I understand, Magistrate Higgins," Arthur replied, his voice deep and decisive. "I am ready for the evaluation, but I hope you will be held legally accountable, Catherine, if this is merely a malicious plot to seize the estate left by my late mother. I will not let you use dirty tricks to tarnish the Howard name. I am the Duke of Ravenscroft, and no one has the right to strip me of this title unless I choose to surrender it. The Howard family has stood here for 500 years, and it will not fall to cheap schemes. Any act harming Ravenscroft will be punished." Arthur's response was firm and clear, warning his aunt of the legal consequences of her greed. Catherine sneered, walking straight to the ancient library. Seeing Clara arranging the files on the desk, Catherine proudly drew an ancient parchment document from her pocket and placed it before Magistrate Higgins. Catherine sneered, walking straight to the library where Clara was working on the files. "Magistrate Higgins, here is the transfer agreement transferring all Ravenscroft mining rights to my son, signed by Duke Arthur Howard himself a week ago in York," Catherine declared. "This is proof that Arthur voluntarily transferred power, knowing he lacked the capacity. If he cannot sign his name matching this document today, it proves he has lost his mind or that this document is valid." She presented the forged deed, confident that the Duke would fail the signature test. Clara glanced at the signature on the document from a few paces away and immediately frowned. With the sharp eye of a calligrapher, she noticed unusual details. The ink pressure was too smooth and perfect, lacking the characteristic tremors of a hand injury. The black ink looked very fresh, reflecting the candlelight abnormally. She observed in silence, preparing for the battle to protect Arthur the next day. Arthur stepped forward to shield her, his gray eyes fixed on Catherine. "You will pay a high price for your greed. Catherine, this house is not the place for your false schemes." Clara noticed the smooth ink lines under the blue light, immediately recognizing the forgery. Clara stepped forward, her warm and steady voice ringing out in the library. "Lady Catherine, a legal signature must reflect the physical condition and writing habits of the signer. I believe Magistrate Higgins will make a fair judgment, based on the most genuine technical evidence." Catherine looked at her with contempt, but Clara's calm made her uneasy. The guests were then escorted by Harrison to their rooms to prepare for the formal evaluation the next day. She spoke with a calm confidence that made Catherine feel a sudden surge of unease. Catherine's actions were not only a legal challenge but a war against Arthur's dignity. Clara turned to him, gently touching his shoulder to offer him absolute support. "We are ready for tomorrow. Your Grace, the truth will protect you. Believe in our hands and ink. A true stroke will defeat deceit." I have prepared the technical evidence to expose their plot before the magistrate. No lie can hide from the light of justice. Every detail on that fake agreement is evidence against her. Clara touched Arthur's shoulder, assuring him that the truth would protect them in the evaluation. Chapter 8. The agreement in the silent night. That night, the ancient library of Ravenscroft Castle remained lit. Clara did not sleep. She knew that the transfer document Catherine brought was the key to this conspiracy. With Magistrate Higgins' permission, Clara kept the document for a technical comparison before the evaluation the next day. She placed the parchment under a large magnifying lens, using the cobalt blue light filtered through a glass water globe to conduct an ink forensics and paper structure analysis. Clara did not sleep, her eyes focused on the forged document under the magnifying lens. The candle wax slowly dripped onto the silver holder, marking the passage of the silent hours as Clara worked. Using the paper-making and ink-crafting knowledge of the Vance family, Clara examined every detail of the forged document. First, the pen stroke and pressure. Under the magnifying glass, the signature on the document had completely uniform ink pressure from start to finish. This was impossible for someone with Arthur's tremors. Arthur's true signature, trained by Clara, always had characteristic breathing pauses and natural angles from the wide quill. The forged signature had a perfect 45-degree angle, while Arthur's quill, due to tremors, always had a slight tilt of 52 degrees. Second, ink composition. The ink on the fake document was standard industrial London iron gall ink, which had a high acidity that slightly scratched the parchment. Arthur, on the other hand, only used Clara's special lavender ink, which was mildly alkaline, did not scratch the paper, and carried a distinct herbal scent. Third, paper and watermark. The parchment of the forged document was standard Westminster paper with no watermark. Ravenscroft documents, however, were written on handmade Cumbria linen paper, watermarked with the Howard family falcon. The 52-degree angle of Arthur's natural quill strokes was completely missing from the forged signature. Clara used a small pin to pick a paper fiber from the edge of the fake document to test the ink's solubility under a drop of alcohol. The ink dissolved immediately, proving it was cheap, fresh ink, unlike the aged oak gall ink of the Howard family. She carefully noted these technical differences on a scrap sheet for the evaluation. She recalled her father's words about the purity of the water used for ink. Cumbria's rainwater gave her lavender ink a unique chemical structure that no industrial London ink could copy. The forged signature was a rushed copy lacking the artisan's soul. She raised her father's old quill, feeling his presence giving her strength in the quiet library. The paper fiber test confirmed that the ink was fresh, proving the document was a recent forgery. "I have found the evidence, Arthur," Clara whispered, her eyes shining with joy as she completed the detailed comparison. She whispered to herself, her eyes shining with joy at finding the crucial technical proof. She felt her late father's guidance in every step, knowing that his artistic legacy was guiding her hand tonight. "Thank you, Clara," Arthur said as he entered the library, his face filled with tenderness. He held a warm cup of ginger tea for her. He looked at her ink-stained hands, deeply moved. He walked her, holding her hands against his cheek. "You stayed awake all night for me. I am deeply grateful. I owe you too much since you came to Cumbria. Your patience is my greatest asset. Your presence has brought light to this dark castle. I thought I would be alone forever. I do not know how to repay your kindness. You are not only protecting my property, but my life." Arthur entered the library, bringing her a cup of hot ginger tea to warm her hands. Arthur spoke in a low voice, looking into her eyes with sincerity. "Clara, this afternoon I signed the marriage settlement with Solicitor Phillips. It provides you with an independent annual allowance of £1,000 and permanent ownership of your father's Bath workshop, which I have Chuok Lai. This settlement declares you the future Duchess of Ravenscroft. Phillips has paid off all your father's debts in London. From this day forward you are free. No one will force you to work as a scribe again. I want you to have the most honorable life. The estate in Sussex left by my mother will be yours, filled with sunshine and lavender. It will be our happy home. I value you not for your background but for your noble soul." He held her hands against his cheek, expressing his deep gratitude for her tireless support. Clara was stunned, warm tears of happiness welling in her eyes. She did not expect the cold Duke to do so much to protect and honor her. She looked at her gentle hands in his large, warm palms. "Arthur, I am only the daughter of a debtor. I never thought I deserved this noble title. I only wanted to help you overcome the pain and protect the Malsot for the workers. Your love for my craft is already the greatest reward. I will always stay by you. Whatever storm comes, I believe in our writing and our hearts." He revealed the marriage settlement, declaring her the future Duchess of Ravenscroft and Bath. "You deserve the best in this world, Clara," Arthur said gently, leaning down to embrace her and kiss her deeply in the quiet library. "Your hands have saved my soul, and I will use my title and power as a shield to protect you all my life. Tomorrow let your pen and evidence expose the truth." Clara was moved to tears by his generosity, vowing to stand by him through any storm. Clara nodded firmly, ready to face Catherine's plot the next day. Under the warm candlelight, they prepared the final documents together. Their love was sealed with absolute trust. They knew no storm could shake their sacred bond. They embraced in the quiet library, their hearts sealed with absolute trust and love. They knew that their shared dedication to the truth would carry them through the trial. Chapter 9. The pen strokes of truth. The next afternoon, the formal evaluation took place in the ancient library of Ravenscroft Castle. Tension filled the room. Magistrate Higgins sat at the mahogany table. Dr. Warren prepared his medical instruments, and Lady Catherine stood by the bookshelf with a smug smile. Arthur Howard sat in the armchair, his right hand hidden in his black glove to hide his anxiety. Clara stood quietly beside him, the lavender inkwell and the special wide quill on the table. Tension filled the ancient library as the evaluators prepared their instruments for the test. The heavy silence of the room was only broken by the occasional crackle of the fireplace, heightening the nervous tension among the attendees. "Your Grace, to confirm your capacity and control of the Ravenscroft mines, you must sign this administrative oath before us," Magistrate Higgins said, pushing the parchment toward Arthur. Magistrate Higgins pushed the administrative oath forward, requesting the Duke's signature. He looked at Arthur with a mixture of doubt and official solemnity. Arthur Howard reached out and removed the black glove. His hand began to shake violently under the strain of his nerve injury. He tried to hold the quill, but the trembling fingers caused ink to splatter on the scrap paper. Catherine immediately sneered, "Look at that, magistrate. A duke who cannot sign his own name cannot run the Ravenscroft mines. Sign the guardianship decree and declare my transfer agreement valid." Arthur's hand trembled under the strain, the pen splattering ink on the scrap paper. Amid the chaos, Clara Vance stepped forward firmly. She sat beside Arthur, gently placing the quill in his trembling hand. Then she wrapped her warm hands over his, transferring her warmth and stillness to him. Clara stepped forward, placing her warm hands over his to guide the pen's movement. Her touch was warm and steady, a physical anchor that immediately quieted the storm of nerves in Arthur's mind. "Arthur, look at me," Clara whispered in his ear, her voice soothing his nerves. "Take a deep breath, let the quill follow your breathing. We will write this signature together. Remember the afternoons we practiced in the Cumbria snow. You can do this, I am here beside you. Let this ink prove your resolve, our hands beat as one." She whispered words of encouragement, helping him find his breathing and his focus. Under Clara's gentle guidance, Arthur's breathing slowed. The tremors in his right hand disappeared. Together they wrote the signature Arthur Howard, Duke of Ravenscroft, perfectly and proudly on the oath, to everyone's amazement. Arthur felt the gentle resistance of the lavender ink combined with the soft quill, which supported his hand. His anxiety washed away, replaced by pride. He smiled at Clara, his eyes filled with gratitude. Together they wrote the signature perfectly, the ink leaving a bold, clear record on the paper. Catherine turned pale, shrieking in anger, "Ridiculous! That signature was written because she held his hand. It has no legal value. It is completely different from the signature on my transfer agreement in York." Catherine shrieked in anger, refusing to accept the validity of the joint signature. "Your transfer agreement is the one that is worthless, Lady Catherine," Clara declared. She turned to Magistrate Higgins and the evaluators, presenting the technical comparison under the magnifying glass. Clara declared the York agreement a forgery, preparing to present her technical evidence. "Magistrate Higgins and respected evaluators, I declare Lady Catherine's transfer agreement to be a blatant forgery. First, the signature on her document was written with completely uniform ink pressure. This is impossible for someone with Arthur's tremors. His true signature always has characteristic breathing pauses and Vautrin angles. Under this lens, the forged strokes are perfectly smooth, showing a very steady hand, unlike Lord Howard's writing, which always shows micro-tremors and horizontal strokes. Nerve injuries always leave physical traces on parchment. Second, the ink on the fake document is London Industrial Iron Gall ink, which scratches the paper due to high acidity. The Duke only signs with my special alkaline lavender ink, which leaves no scratches and carries a distinct herbal scent. Third, the parchment is standard Westminster paper without the Howard Falcon watermark. Ravenscroft documents are always written on handmade Cumbria linen paper with this watermark. These two papers cannot be confused. Every Ravenscroft document has its watermark, officially registered in Cumbria. She presented the three technical proofs: the pen pressure, the ink acidity, and the falcon watermark. She explained each forensic marker with absolute clarity, leaving no room for Lady Catherine's defense to stand. Dr. Warren stepped forward, examining the details under the lens and nodding in admiration. Magistrate Higgins, Miss Vance's calligraphic evidence is accurate and scientific. The signature on Lady Catherine's agreement was clearly forged by someone with a normal hand. This is a fraud to seize the estate. I declare the Duke's motor recovery under Miss Vance's guidance is perfect. I confirm his capacity. This evidence is more convincing than any medical test. Miss Vance's analysis is an outstanding combination of art and forensics. Their coordination has created a wonderful neurological therapy, helping to control the tremors. This is a major step in functional recovery. Dr. Warren examined the details under the lens, confirming the accuracy of her forensic analysis. Magistrate Higgins struck his gavel. The evidence is clear. Lady Catherine, forging signatures to seize property is a severe crime. I deny your petition, confirm Duke Arthur Howard's capacity, and order the guards to arrest you immediately for fraud and forgery. All allegations against the Duke are dismissed. The truth has triumphed. Magistrate Higgins struck his gavel, ordering the immediate arrest of Lady Catherine. Catherine turned pale, collapsing to the floor in humiliation as the guards handcuffed her. Justice was served by Clara's gentle hands and calligraphic wisdom. Justice was served by Clara's gentle hands, ending the threat to the Ravenscroft estate. The truth had stood the test of time and examination, vindicating the Vance family name and securing the future of the Ravenscroft estate. Chapter 10: The Harmony of Written Song. The next morning the Cumbria sky bore the cold gray of late autumn, reflecting the fall of a greedy power. Lady Catherine Howard stood trembling before the writing desk in the Duke's study, her hand shaking as she signed her confession of forgery and surrendered her rights to the Ravenscroft Trust. Arthur Howard stood tall, his ash-gray eyes cold as he watched her. Beside him stood Clara Vance, the woman Catherine had dismissed as a cheap scribe, now standing proudly as the future mistress of the castle. The autumn sun cast a warm golden light over the ancient stone battlements of the castle. You will leave immediately and live in isolation at the northern estate, Catherine, Arthur said decisively. My only leniency is not dragging you to London court. Spend the rest of your life reflecting on your crimes. All stolen assets will be returned to their owners. Your greed will never touch Ravenscroft again. Clara stood proudly, her skills celebrated by the entire Northern Calligraphy Guild. Catherine signed with trembling hands, throwing the pen on the table in hatred, and entered the carriage under the cold rain, leaving the estate forever. Butler Harrison bowed as she departed, returning peace to Ravenscroft. The storm from London was completely silenced. Peace returned to the ancient home. Catherine signed her confession with trembling hands, leaving the estate in deep humiliation. 3 weeks later, the Cumbria sky turned clear, filled with the golden sunshine of autumn. The hills surrounding the St. Jude Chapel were filled with late lavender, spreading a sweet, sweet fragrance in the wind. Today was the wedding of the Duke of Ravenscroft and Clara Vance. St. Jude Chapel was decorated with thousands of white roses and purple lavender for the wedding. The wedding was warm and solemn. The St. Jude Chapel was decorated with thousands of white roses and purple lavender. On the old oak pews, the Cumbria gentry who had once shunned Clara sat in silence. They had heard of the massive marriage settlement Arthur signed, and the recovery of her father's workshop in Bath, clearing the Vance name before the Royal Academy. As the organ music played, Clara appeared in a wedding gown of ivory silk satin. Her pride and gentle hands had created a true duchess. Without Mayfair jewels, her character and intellect conquered all. They bowed as she passed, admiring the woman who saved the Duke. The gentry who had once shunned Clara now bowed in respect as she walked down the aisle. Arthur stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on Clara from the moment she entered. He reached out to take her hand, their hands clasping tightly before the altar. Arthur stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on Clara as she approached in her silk gown. Before God and these witnesses, the old vicar announced, "I declare you husband and wife." They exchanged their vows before God, their voices clear and steady in the silent chapel. Arthur leaned down to place a gentle but firm kiss on her lips, vowing to protect her all his life. Thunderous applause and church bells rang across the Cumbria valleys. The vicar pronounced them husband and wife, sealing their union under the laws of the realm. After the ceremony, a warm reception was held in the grand hall of Ravenscroft Castle. The Cumbria families offered their warmest congratulations. Butler Harrison approached, presenting a small oak box. "My lady, this is your father's old royal seal ring. The Duke took it from an auction in York as your wedding gift. It is the symbol of the Vance family honor." Clara opened the box, seeing the palm branch seal of the Vance family, tears of joy welling in her eyes. She looked at Arthur, his eyes filled with pride and protection. Harrison smiled, happy that the castle had found joy. Harrison presented the royal seal ring, a wedding gift from the Duke, to his new Duchess. That afternoon the Ravenscroft estate was bathed in warm sunshine. Arthur held Clara's hand as they walked along the trail by the lavender fields. He pointed to the horizon. "Clara, I have sent a letter to the Royal Academy. Solicitor Phillips has restored your father's honor on the royal records, and the Bath workshop will reopen under your name next week. Your father's home is debt-free. You have your place back, where your hands can write beautiful strokes. The Bath workshop will smell of oak gall ink again." Arthur held her hand as they walked through the lavender fields under the warm sunshine. The purple blossoms danced in the light breeze, filling the air with their sweet, calming scent. Clara was stunned, resting her head on the Duke's shoulder, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. They entered the carriage decorated with lavender, heading toward a bright future under the golden sunset of Cumbria. He pointed to the horizon, promising a bright future in their new home in Sussex. "I still feel as though I am dreaming, Clara," Arthur said softly, squeezing her gentle hand. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, her heart filled with a deep, lasting peace. Clara stopped, turning to look at him, her smile radiant in the evening light. "This is no dream. Arthur, this is the reality we built together with love and patience from our hands. We have found true harmony." The wind carried the sweet scent of lavender, whispering of their happiness across the valleys. Arthur held her close amid the fragrant lavender fields. The storm had passed and the evil plot was in the past. Now at Ravenscroft, only love, peace, and a bright future remained, where true happiness had returned under the guidance of gentle hands. They would write the new chapter of their lives with the most enduring ink of honesty and love. Every penstroke would sing of their happiness, echoing across the Cumbria valleys filled with purple lavender. Their love would endure like the ancient parchment written with the quill of sincerity. Under the golden sunset of Cumbria, the Duke and Duchess welcomed the new chapter of their lives. Their hands remained clasped, a symbol of their eternal bond and the quiet victory of love over greed.